The espresso machine hissed angrily behind me as I balanced 4 plates along my forearm, a skill perfected over 2 years of waitressing at Bellissimo, the most expensive Italian restaurant in the city. My feet ached in the mandatory black heels that pinched my toes, and the starched collar of my white button-up shirt scratched against my neck. It was Friday night, which meant the restaurant buzzed with the city's elite, people who spent more on a bottle of wine than I made in a month. "Table 7 needs water," Marco, the head waiter, snapped as he brushed past me, not bothering to help, despite seeing my struggle with the heavy plates. I nodded, unable to respond verbally, as I concentrated on not dropping everything. The weight of exhaustion pressed on my shoulders like a physical burden. 3 double shifts this week, plus night classes at the community college where I was studying to become an interpreter. American Sign Language had been my passion since childhood. My best friend growing up had been deaf, and I'd learned to sign before I could properly write. "Yes, of course, right away," I murmured to Marco's already retreating back. No one ever listened to me here. I was invisible, just another server in black and white, blending into the background of wealth and privilege. I delivered the plates to table 12, a group of businessmen who barely acknowledged my existence, before grabbing a crystal carafe for table 7. That's when I first noticed them. The private alcove near the back wall, usually reserved for the owner's special guests, was occupied by a small group. My eyes were immediately drawn to the older woman, elegantly dressed in a navy blue dress with a string of pearls. Her silver-streaked black hair was swept into a classic updo. Something about the way she watched people's lips with intense concentration made me pause. Beside her sat a man who made the air around me feel suddenly charged, as if someone had flipped a switch and filled the room with electricity. He wasn't particularly showy. His dark suit was impeccably tailored, but understated. It was his presence that commanded attention. Broad shoulders, olive skin, and features that seemed carved from stone. High cheekbones, a strong jaw darkened with 5 o'clock shadow, and eyes so intensely black they appeared to absorb light rather than reflect it. He wasn't alone. 2 men in similar dark suits sat at strategic points around the table, their attention constantly scanning the restaurant, even as they pretended to be engaged in dinner. Bodyguards, I realized with a jolt. The man's hands were adorned with only 1 ring, a thick gold band with some kind of crest on his right hand. He gestured as he spoke to the older woman, his movements measured and controlled. When Marco rushed over to personally take their order, I knew immediately. This was someone important, someone dangerous. I continued with my duties, trying not to stare, but found my gaze continually drawn to their table. The older woman seemed to be struggling to understand what the others were saying. She kept leaning forward, her expression pinched in concentration, occasionally asking the man beside her, her son, to repeat things. I recognized that look from years of watching my friend struggle in restaurants with poor lighting and background noise. She was deaf. An hour into their meal, I was clearing a nearby table when I overheard Marco speaking in rapid-fire Italian to the kitchen staff. "The Vitelli party needs more attention. Do you know who that is? That's Dante Vitelli. His family owns half the shipping business on the East Coast, and that's his mother visiting from Sicily. The boss said to give them whatever they need." The name sent a chill through me. Even I, oblivious as I often was to the city's underworld, had heard whispers about the Vitelli family. Old money, powerful connections, and according to campus gossip, ties to organized crime that went back generations. My path to their table was inevitable. Marco had been called away to deal with a complaint from another table, and the bartender was signaling frantically that drinks were ready for the Vitelli party. I picked up the tray, took a deep breath, and approached. The conversation halted as I came near. The bodyguards tensed slightly, their eyes assessing me with cold efficiency. "Mr. Vitelli," Dante looked up, his gaze sweeping over me in a single glance that somehow felt like he had catalogued everything about me, from my worn shoes to the small scar above my eyebrow. "Your drinks," I said quietly, placing each glass carefully on the table. Mrs. Vitelli looked confused, her eyes darting between faces, trying to catch what was being said. When I placed her drink, a simple sparkling water with lemon, in front of her, she looked up at me with a grateful but slightly frustrated smile. Without thinking, my hands moved. "Would you like anything else with your water?" I signed. the movements as natural to me as breathing. The transformation in her face was immediate. Surprise, then delight spread across her features. Her hands flew up, signing back rapidly. "You sign. No one here signs." "My son tries, but he's terrible," I smiled and responded. "I'm studying to be an interpreter." "It's nice to meet you." From the corner of my eye, I saw Dante Vitelli go completely still, like a predator who had spotted something unexpected in its territory. His black eyes narrowed, fixed on my hands, then my face. The intensity of his stare made my cheeks flush, but I kept my attention on his mother. "What a lovely surprise," she signed, her movements elegant despite her age. "These dinners are usually so isolating for me. Everyone talks around me." I was about to respond when I felt it. The heat of someone's gaze burning into me. Dante Vitelli was watching our exchange with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Curiosity? Suspicion? Something darker and more intense. "You sign," he said, his voice deep and smooth with just a hint of an Italian accent. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I replied, suddenly aware that I might have overstepped. "I'm sorry if I was being too familiar." "No," he said, the word sharp and commanding, then more softly. "No, it was unexpected." His mother tapped his arm and signed something quickly. He responded with clumsy, halting signs that made her roll her eyes affectionately. The contrast between his commanding presence and his awkward signing created an odd vulnerability that seemed completely at odds with everything else about him. Mrs. Vitelli turned back to me. "My son works too much to practice properly. He understands more than he can sign." I nodded politely, hyper-aware of Dante's unwavering attention. "I should get back to my other tables," I said aloud, simultaneously signing for Mrs. Vitelli's benefit. "Please let me know if you need anything else." As I turned to leave, I felt a light touch on my wrist. Dante Vitelli's fingers barely made contact with my skin, but I froze as effectively as if he had grabbed me. "Your name," he said, his voice soft but no less commanding. "Elena," I replied, surprised by the slight tremor in my voice. "Elena Russo." Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition? Interest? I couldn't tell. He released my wrist with a slight nod. "Thank you for your kindness to my mother, Elena Russo." The way he said my name, rolling the R slightly, extending the vowels, made it sound like it belonged to him somehow. I managed a small smile before retreating, my heart racing as if I'd narrowly escaped something dangerous. For the rest of their meal, I found excuses to attend their table, signing with Mrs. Vitelli, Sophia, she insisted I call her, about simple things. The food, the weather, her trip from Sicily. All the while, I felt Dante's gaze following me, assessing every movement, every smile I offered his mother. When they finally prepared to leave, Sophia signed enthusiastically, "You've made my night so much brighter. Usually I just watch everyone talk and pretend to understand." "It was my pleasure," I signed back truthfully. Despite the intimidating presence of her son, I had genuinely enjoyed our conversation. As Dante helped his mother stand, he hesitated, then reached into his jacket. The movement made me tense instinctively, but he merely withdrew a business card, placing it on the table next to a stack of bills that would have covered their meal several times over. "My mother comes to the city once a month," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. "It would please her to have someone who could communicate with her properly." It wasn't a request. It wasn't quite a command either. It hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken meaning. Before I could respond, they were gone, Sophia giving me one last signed thank you as Dante guided her out, flanked by his ever-present guards. One remained behind briefly, sliding the stack of bills and the business card toward me with a meaningful look before following his boss. The card was heavy, expensive cardstock with only a name and number embossed in black. No title, no company name, just Dante Vitelli and a phone number. I slipped it into my pocket, telling myself I would never use it, even as I knew deep down that I was already ensnared in something I didn't understand. That night, I dreamed of black eyes watching me from shadows and hands speaking words I couldn't quite comprehend. The card burned in my pocket for 3 days. I would take it out at night, turning it over in my fingers, tracing the embossed letters of his name. Each time I told myself to throw it away. Each time, I tucked it back into my wallet instead. On the fourth day, my phone rang during my morning shift at the diner where I worked weekends. The number was unfamiliar. Hello? I balanced the phone between my ear and shoulder while refilling salt shakers. Elena Russo. Again, that voice that somehow made my name sound like it belonged to him. Not a question, but a confirmation. My fingers stilled. Mr. Vitelli, you haven't called. There was no accusation in his tone, merely a statement of fact. I hesitated, unsure how to explain my reluctance without sounding rude. I wasn't sure if I should. A pause. In the background, I heard the muffled sounds of an office, phones ringing, voices calling out. My mother is returning to the city this weekend. She asked for you specifically. The way he said it made it clear that Dante Vitelli wasn't accustomed to his mother, or himself, being denied anything they wanted. I'm working Saturday night, I said, the excuse sounding feeble even to my own ears. I'll speak with your manager at Bellissimo. What time is your class on Friday? My blood ran cold. I had never mentioned my class schedule to him or his mother. How did you? I make it my business to know things, Elena. His voice softened slightly. My mother enjoyed your company. She has few pleasures in life since my father's passing. I would consider it a personal favor if you would join us for dinner. A personal favor to Dante Vitelli. The implications hung in the air between us. I thought about the rumors that circulated about his family, the way the staff at Bellissimo had practically tripped over themselves to serve him. The silent, watchful men who never left his side. Just dinner? I asked, immediately regretting how the question sounded. A soft chuckle, rich and warm, completely at odds with the dangerous aura that surrounded him. Just dinner. At Veronesi's. 7 o'clock. A car will pick you up at 6:30. Not an invitation, an arrangement. He hadn't even asked for my address, which meant he already knew it. The thought sent a shiver down my spine that wasn't entirely fear. I'll be ready, I said finally. Good. The satisfaction in that single word was almost tangible. Wear something nice. My mother appreciates elegance. The line went dead before I could respond, leaving me staring at my phone, wondering what I'd just agreed to. That evening, I stood in front of my tiny closet in the cramped apartment I shared with 2 other students, facing a crisis. Something nice, in Dante Vitelli's world, probably cost more than my monthly rent. The nicest thing I owned was the black dress I'd worn to my grandmother's funeral 2 years ago. My roommate Jess found me sitting on the floor surrounded by rejected outfits. Hot date? She asked, leaning against the doorframe. Not exactly. I hesitated, then decided a half-truth was safer than explaining I was having dinner with a man who was probably a mafioso. I'm having dinner with a client and his mother. She's deaf, and they want me to interpret. Jess's eyes lit up. Wait, is this for that interpreting agency you applied to? Elena, that's amazing. I nodded, allowing her to believe the lie. It felt safer somehow. Well, you can't wear any of this, she said, gesturing at the sad pile of clothes around me. Come on, you can borrow something of mine. Friday evening arrived with the rumble of a car engine outside my apartment building exactly at 6:30. I peered through the blinds to see a sleek black sedan waiting at the curb. One of the men I recognized from the restaurant stood beside it, scanning the street with vigilant eyes. I smoothed down the emerald green dress Jess had lent me, checked my simple gold earrings, and took a deep breath. The dress was more elegant than anything I owned, fitted at the waist with a modest neckline and hem that fell just below my knees. I'd pulled my dark hair into a simple twist and applied light makeup. Professional but polished, I hoped. The guard, I still didn't know his name, gave me a once-over as I approached, then opened the rear door without speaking. The interior was cool and dark, smelling of expensive leather, and empty. Mr. Vitelli? I asked uncertainly. Meeting you there? The guard replied, closing the door firmly. The drive took 20 minutes, during which I rehearsed what I would say, how I would act. Just dinner, I reminded myself. Just an evening interpreting for a sweet older woman who happened to be the mother of a dangerous man. Veronesi's was not just expensive, it was exclusive. The kind of place that didn't list prices on the menu because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. The kind of place I had only ever walked past, glancing in at the warm lighting and crystal glasses. The guard escorted me inside, where the maitre d' immediately straightened to attention. "Ah, Miss Russo, Mr. Vitelli is expecting you. Please, follow me." We bypassed the main dining room entirely, heading toward a private area in the back. With each step, my nervousness grew. What was I doing here? I was a waitress and part-time student, not someone who dined in places like this with people like them. The private dining room was intimate, with just one table set for 3. Sofia Vitelli was already seated, looking elegant in a deep burgundy dress, her silver-streaked hair arranged artfully. Her face brightened when she saw me. "Elena, you came," she signed enthusiastically. "I was worried you wouldn't." I smiled, genuinely pleased to see her again. "How could I refuse? You look beautiful tonight." Her hands moved gracefully. "This old thing?" Dante insisted I dress up. He's been in a mood all week, fussing over every detail of this dinner. Before I could respond, I felt it again. That peculiar awareness, like electricity humming along my skin. I turned to find Dante Vitelli watching us from the doorway, his expression inscrutable. He had exchanged his business suit for a more casual, but no less immaculate, charcoal gray jacket over a black shirt. No tie. The top button undone. It should have made him look more approachable. Somehow, it didn't. "Elena," he said, my name rolling off his tongue like he was tasting it. "You look lovely." "Thank you," I replied, fighting the urge to fidget under his intense gaze. "Your mother and I were just saying hello." He moved into the room with that controlled grace I remembered, stopping to kiss his mother's cheek before taking the seat across from me. This close, I could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive, with notes of cedar and spice. "Wine?" he offered, gesturing to the bottle already open on the table. "Just a little, thank you." His hands, I noticed, were beautiful in a masculine way, strong, with long fingers that handled the wine bottle with deliberate care. The gold signet ring gleamed under the soft lighting as he poured. I signed the wine offer to Sofia, who nodded enthusiastically. Dinner progressed with a strange rhythm. I would sign the conversation for Sofia, translating Dante's words, and then my own. Sofia was charming and talkative, asking about my studies, my family, how I had learned to sign. I told her about my childhood friend, about my dreams of becoming a certified interpreter. All the while, Dante watched. He participated in the conversation, certainly, asked questions, commented on the food, told stories about his childhood in Sicily that made Sofia laugh silently, her shoulders shaking with mirth. But beneath it all was that unwavering attention, assessing every gesture, every expression that crossed my face. During the main course, a delicate sea base that probably cost more than I made in a day, Sofia excused herself to the restroom. The moment she was gone, the air between Dante and me seemed to thicken. "You're very good at that," he said, nodding toward my hands. "Signing. Thank you. I've had a lot of practice." He took a sip of his wine, those dark eyes never leaving mine. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" A slight lift of one corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. "Not you." The simplicity of the statement made my cheeks warm. I shifted in my seat, unsure how to respond. "My mother likes you," he continued. "She says you treat her like a person, not a problem to be managed. That's rare." "She is a person," I replied, a hint of defensiveness creeping into my voice. "A lovely one." Something in his expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Yes, she is." He leaned forward slightly, dropping his voice. "Do you know who I am, Elena?" The question sent a chill through me. Of course I knew. Or at least I had heard the rumors. The Vitelli family's influence extended far beyond legitimate business. But acknowledging that felt dangerous. "You're Sofia's son," I answered carefully. "You own shipping companies." He studied me for a long moment, then chuckled softly. "That's a diplomatic answer." He reached for his wine glass, the movement casual, yet somehow threatening in its deliberateness. "I appreciate discretion. It's an undervalued quality these days." Sofia returned then, saving me from having to respond. She signed enthusiastically about the beautiful bathroom with its fresh flowers and scented soaps. I translated for Dante, grateful for the interruption. The rest of the evening passed pleasantly enough, though I never fully relaxed. When dessert was served, a delicate tiramisu that melted on my tongue, Sophia signed that she was growing tired. "Of course, Mama," Dante replied both aloud and with clumsy signs. "I'll have Antonio bring the car around." As Sophia gathered her things, she took my hands in hers. "This was wonderful. You must come again when I'm in town next month. Maybe you can show me some of the city. It's been years since I've been to the art museum." I smiled, genuinely touched by her enthusiasm. I'd like that. Dante watched our exchange with that same intense focus. When Sophia had donned her wrap and kissed my cheek goodbye, he instructed one of his men to escort her to the car. "I'll see Elena home," he said, in a tone that brooked no argument. Alone with him, the private dining room seemed to shrink, his presence filling every corner. He gestured toward my nearly full wine glass. "Would you like to finish? There's no rush." Against my better judgment, I nodded. "Thank you for tonight. Your mother is delightful. She is my heart," he said simply, the words so at odds with his dangerous demeanor that I blinked in surprise. "Since my father died, she's been adrift. Tonight was the happiest I've seen her in a long time. I'm glad I could help," I said sincerely. He studied me for a moment, then reached into his jacket, extracting a slim envelope which he placed on the table between us. "For your time this evening." I stared at the envelope, a cold feeling spreading through my chest. "You're paying me?" "You provided a service," he replied, his expression unreadable. "Interpreting for my mother." "I didn't come here expecting payment," I said, pushing the envelope back toward him. "I came because your mother asked for me." Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "You refuse my gift?" The word gift hung between us, loaded with meaning. I sensed I was navigating treacherous waters. "I don't want money for spending an evening with your mother." "It wasn't work. It was a pleasure." For a long moment, he said nothing, merely watched me with those unfathomable dark eyes. Then, slowly, he returned the envelope to his jacket. "As you wish." He finished his wine in a single swallow, then stood. "Come, I'll take you home." Outside, a different car waited, smaller, more discreet, with no driver in sight. Dante opened the passenger door for me, then rounded the hood to slide behind the wheel. The interior was warm and intimate, the dashboard lights casting a soft glow on his profile as he drove. Neither of us spoke for several minutes, the silence broken only by the purr of the engine and the occasional direction from the car's navigation system. "You don't know anything about me," he said finally, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Yet you sat at my table, drank my wine, made my mother smile. Why?" The question caught me off guard. "I told you." "Yes, because my mother asked." "But you could have refused. Many would have." I looked out the window at the city lights blurring past. She reminded me of my friend growing up, always trying to read lips, always a step behind in conversations. It's isolating. He was quiet for so long, I thought he might not respond. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. My father insisted she learn to read lips, to speak. He thought signing would make her stand out more. For years, I watched her struggle, pretending to understand conversations when she was missing half of what was said. The confession felt intimate, a glimpse behind the armor he wore so effortlessly. That must have been difficult for both of you. I learned to sign secretly at first. When my father discovered it, he shook his head slightly. He was not pleased, but by then I was old enough to stand my ground. We had reached my apartment building. Dante parked but made no move to exit the car. "You live here?" There was no judgment in his tone, merely curiosity. "Yes." I felt suddenly self-conscious about the rundown exterior, the cracked front steps, with 2 roommates. It's all I can afford on a waitress's salary. His gaze swept over the building, then returned to my face. "You work 2 jobs and study. That takes determination. Or desperation," I replied with a small laugh. "There's nothing desperate about you, Elena Russo." The way he said it, with absolute conviction, made my breath catch. Before I could respond, he was out of the car and opening my door. The gentlemanly gesture seemed at odds with everything I'd heard about him, yet perfectly in keeping with the man I'd observed with his mother. He walked me to the front door, maintaining a respectful distance. At the entrance, I turned to thank him again, only to find him much closer than I expected. In the dim light of the building's entrance, his eyes were almost entirely black, his expression unreadable. "My mother returns in 3 weeks," he said. "She would be disappointed if you weren't available." Again, not quite a command, not quite a request. "I'd like to see her again," I admitted. Something in his posture shifted, a minute relaxation I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't been studying him so intently. "Good." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a different card, this one with his personal number, he explained. "If you need anything before then, anything at all." I accepted the card, our fingers brushing briefly. Even that fleeting contact sent a jolt through me. "Good night, Mr. Vitelli." A shadow of a smile. "Dante," he corrected. "After sharing a meal with my mother, I think we can dispense with formalities." "Dante," I repeated, the name foreign on my tongue. He reached out slowly, deliberately, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear that had escaped my twist. "Sweet dreams, Elena." As I watched him drive away, I knew I was standing on the edge of something dangerous. The sensible part of me screamed to walk away, to forget Sophia's kind eyes and Dante's intense gaze, to return to my safe, ordinary life. But as I climbed the stairs to my apartment, his card burning a hole in my pocket just like the first one had, I knew it was already too late. I was caught in a web of my own making, drawn to a flame that would either warm me or burn me to ashes. Block 3. The weeks that followed settled into an uneasy rhythm. By day, I was still just Elena, the waitress, the student, the girl with worn shoes and second-hand textbooks. But Dante Vitelli had cast a shadow over my life that I couldn't seem to escape, even when he wasn't physically present. It started with small things. The manager at Bellissimo suddenly offered me better shifts and fewer tables, allowing me more time to study. When I arrived at class one evening to find my usual seat taken, the professor mentioned a special scholarship had become available, and somehow, I was the only candidate. The ancient laptop I used for assignments mysteriously disappeared from my apartment, only to be replaced the next day with a sleek new model left in a box with no note, no sender. I knew who was behind it all. I hadn't called the number on his card, but somehow he was there anyway, rearranging pieces of my life like a chess master positioning his pieces. "You need to be careful," my roommate Jess warned one night after I'd returned from a late shift. I saw a black car parked across the street again, same one as last week. I pretended ignorance, but I'd noticed the cars too. Never the same vehicle, but always the same purpose. Watching, waiting. Protecting, perhaps, though the thought offered little comfort. 2 weeks after our dinner, my phone rang while I was studying at the library. His name flashed on the screen, a number I hadn't programmed in myself. "Hello, Dante," I answered, stepping outside to take the call. "Elena." A pause, the sound of papers shuffling. "My mother has decided to come to the city earlier than planned. She arrives tomorrow." The abruptness of his announcement threw me. "Oh, I see. She's expressed interest in visiting the Museum of Modern Art. I've arranged for tickets at 11. I'll send a car." Again, not asking, telling. A small rebellion sparked inside me. "I have class tomorrow morning." "No, you don't." His tone was matter-of-fact. "Professor Winters has canceled due to a family emergency." The rebellion flared hotter. "Did you arrange that too?" A soft chuckle, warm and dangerous. "Contrary to what you might think, Elena, I don't control everything. Sometimes coincidences are just coincidences." I wasn't sure I believed him, but arguing seemed pointless. "Fine. 11 o'clock. Wear comfortable shoes. My mother tends to be thorough in museums." The line went dead before I could respond, a habit of his I was beginning to find irritating despite myself. True to his word, Professor Winters emailed that evening to cancel class. I tried not to read too much into the coincidence, but doubt lingered. Just how far did Dante Vitelli's influence extend? The next morning, a different car arrived, a more discreet sedan with tinted windows. The driver was new, a silent man who merely nodded when I approached. He drove me to a private entrance of the museum where Dante waited, looking casually elegant in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that made his olive skin glow. Sophia stood beside him, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Elena, I hope this wasn't too much trouble," she signed immediately. I told Dante it was short notice, but he insisted you wouldn't mind. I shot him a look that he received with an impassive expression before replying to Sophia, "Not at all. I love this museum." For the next 3 hours, we wandered through exhibitions, my hands flying as I translated the placards and Sophia's excited comments. Dante remained mostly silent, his attention divided between his mother's enjoyment and watching me. Occasionally, he would contribute an observation about a particular piece, revealing a surprisingly sophisticated knowledge of art. During a break, when Sophia visited the restroom, I found myself alone with him in front of a massive abstract canvas. "You don't approve of my methods," he said, his eyes fixed on the painting. I hesitated, unsure how to navigate this conversation safely. "I don't like feeling managed." He turned to face me fully, his gaze intense. "I assure you, Elena, if I were managing you, you would be far more comfortable than you are now. The scholarship," I said, "the laptop, the shifts at Bellissimo, those weren't coincidences." Something like respect flickered in his eyes. "You notice things. That's good." "Please stop," I said, keeping my voice level despite my racing heart. "I appreciate your generosity, but I've worked for everything in my life. I need to keep doing that." He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable, even when it's unnecessarily difficult. "Especially then. It's my life, Dante. My struggles make me who I am." He took a step closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, feel the heat radiating from his body. "And who are you, Elena Russo?" The question hung between us, loaded with meanings I couldn't fully decipher. Before I could answer, Sophia returned, and the moment shattered like glass. The day concluded with a late lunch at a small Italian cafe that I strongly suspected Dante owned, given how the staff practically tripped over themselves to serve us. Throughout the meal, I felt his gaze on me, evaluating, calculating. Whatever test I was unwittingly taking, I couldn't tell if I was passing or failing. When Sophia mentioned feeling tired, Dante immediately arranged for her to be taken back to his penthouse to rest. I expected to be dismissed as well, but to my surprise, he invited me to walk with him through the nearby park. "I've asked my people to respect your wishes," he said as we strolled along a tree-lined path. "No more unsolicited assistance, thank you," I replied, genuinely surprised by his concession. "However," he continued, "I would ask that you permit me one indulgence." I glanced at him warily. "What kind of indulgence?" He reached into his jacket and withdrew a small box, offering it to me. "A gift. For my mother's sake, if not for mine." I hesitated before taking it, feeling as though I were accepting far more than whatever lay inside. The box was navy velvet, hinged at the back. When I opened it, I found a delicate gold bracelet with a small charm, hands forming the ASL sign for friend. "Dante," I breathed, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "My mother chose it," he said, though something in his expression made me doubt this was entirely true. "She considers you a friend. In our family, we take care of our friends." The warning beneath the statement was clear, though whether it was a promise of protection or a subtle threat, I couldn't be sure. "It's beautiful," I said honestly, "but I can't accept—" "You can," he interrupted, his tone brooking no argument, "and you will." Before I could protest further, he took the bracelet from the box and fastened it around my wrist, his fingers lingering against my pulse point. The contact sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with fear. "There," he said, satisfaction evident in his voice. "Now you carry a piece of us with you." The possessiveness in his words should have alarmed me. Instead, I found myself strangely moved by the gesture, by the weight of the gold against my skin. "Thank you." We continued walking, a strange tension settling between us. I was acutely aware of his proximity, of the occasional brush of his arm against mine, of the way other park-goers gave us a wide berth as if sensing his dangerous aura. "Tell me about your dreams, Elena," he said suddenly, beyond interpreting. "What do you want from life?" The question caught me off guard. Security, I suppose. Enough money to stop worrying about rent and bills. Maybe travel someday. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Simple pleasures. Admirable. What about you?" I dared to ask. "What does Dante Vitelli dream about?" A shadow crossed his face. "I stopped dreaming a long time ago. I have responsibilities, obligations." "To your family business," I said carefully. His dark eyes found mine. "Yes, to the family business." The way he emphasized the words left little doubt about what that business entailed. We had reached a secluded area of the park, a small stone bridge arching over a stream. Dante stopped, leaning against the railing. "You're afraid of me," he stated, watching me closely. I considered lying, but knew he would see through it. "Sometimes. Yet you're here." "Yes." "Why?" The question hung between us, demanding an honesty I wasn't sure I was ready to give. "I don't know," I admitted finally. "Maybe I'm just curious." A smile, small but genuine, curved his lips. "Curiosity can be dangerous, Elena. So can many worthwhile things," I countered. He laughed then, the sound rich and unexpected, transforming his face from something dangerous to something almost boyish. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, but it left me breathless nonetheless. "You continue to surprise me," he said, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, a gesture becoming familiar between us. The moment was shattered by the ring of his phone. His expression darkened as he checked the screen. "I need to take this." He stepped away, his posture stiffening as he answered. I couldn't hear the conversation, but the change in him was immediate and chilling. Gone was the man who laughed on a bridge, replaced by someone harder, colder. When he returned, his face was a mask of controlled fury. "I need to go. Business requires my attention." The word business felt loaded with ominous meaning. I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. "Of course. Antonio will see you home." He gestured to a black SUV that had appeared at the park entrance, a suited man waiting beside it. Before I could respond, Dante stepped closer, his hand coming up to cradle my cheek. The gesture was so unexpected, so intimate, that I froze. "Lock your doors tonight, Elena. Don't go out alone." Fear trickled down my spine at his warning. "Why? What's happening?" His thumb brushed my cheekbone, a fleeting caress at odds with the hardness in his eyes. "Nothing that concerns you, just a precaution." He left me there on the bridge, striding away with purpose in every line of his body. Antonio materialized at my side within moments, silently escorting me to the waiting vehicle. That night, I lay awake, the gold bracelet glinting in the sliver of moonlight that slipped through my curtains. Outside, I knew a black car waited, Dante's men keeping watch. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, I found myself oddly comforted. My phone pinged with a message just after midnight. Unknown number, but I knew who it was before I read it. "Sleep well. You're safe." 2 days later, I saw the news. A warehouse fire in the industrial district, rumored to be connected to organized crime. 3 bodies found. Police investigating. The bracelet felt heavier on my wrist. A week passed with no word from Dante. Sophia had returned to Sicily. He'd told me in a brief text. Family matters required his attention. The black cars still appeared occasionally outside my apartment, but otherwise, it was as if our strange interlude had never happened. Then came the night that changed everything. I was closing Bellissimo alone, the manager having left early with a migraine. The last customers had departed an hour before, leaving me to count the register and lock up. Rain pounded against the windows, the October night unseasonably cold. The bell above the door jingled as I was wiping down the last table. I turned, a polite refusal ready on my lips, only to freeze at the sight of 3 men I didn't recognize. "We're closed," I said, a sudden sense of dread washing over me. The tallest one, a blond man with cold blue eyes, smiled without warmth. "We're not here to eat, sweetheart. We're looking for Vitelli." I took a step back, my hand instinctively going to the bracelet on my wrist. "I don't know who that is." "Don't insult my intelligence," he replied, his accent distinctly Eastern European. "We've been watching you, the museum, the park." He gestured to his companions, who were now moving to block the exits. "Vitelli's new toy." "I'm just a waitress," I insisted, my eyes darting around for a weapon, an escape route. The man laughed, the sound chilling. "A waitress who wears his mark," he nodded toward my bracelet. "Tell us where to find him, and this doesn't have to get unpleasant." My heart hammered in my chest as the men advanced, their intentions clear in their cold eyes and predatory movements. In that moment, I realized just how deep I had fallen into Dante's world, and how unprepared I was for its dangers. "I don't know where he is," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We're not... I barely know him." The blonde man clicked his tongue disapprovingly. Now, don't lie to us. Vitelli doesn't let just anyone spend time with his precious mother." I backed away slowly, my mind racing. My phone was in my purse behind the counter. If I could just reach it. "Stay where you are," the man ordered, as if reading my thoughts. He nodded to one of his companions who moved toward the counter. "Check her bag." The second man, shorter with a jagged scar across his jaw, rifled through my purse, emptying its contents onto the counter. When my phone clattered out, he snatched it up, smirking. "Looking for this?" "Please," I said, hating the tremor in my voice. "I'm just a waitress. I interpreted for his mother once, that's all." The blonde man approached me slowly, circling like a predator. "Interesting. Vitelli has men watching your apartment. He buys you expensive gifts." He reached out suddenly, grabbing my wrist and yanking it up to examine the bracelet. "He doesn't do that for just a waitress." I winced at his grip, but refused to cry out. "I don't know what you want from me. It's simple," he replied, his face uncomfortably close to mine. "You're going to call Vitelli. Tell him you're in trouble. When he comes rushing to save his little interpreter." He dragged a finger across his throat in a universal gesture. Cold fear washed over me. They wanted to use me as bait, to kill Dante. "He won't come," I said desperately. "I'm nothing to him." The man's grip tightened painfully on my wrist. "We'll see." He nodded to the third man, who had remained silent by the door. "Secure the back entrance. Make sure we're not interrupted." As the third man moved away, the blonde attacker pulled out a knife, the blade glinting under the restaurant's dim lights. "Now, let's motivate you to be convincing when you make that call." Time seemed to slow. I could see the path before me. They would hurt me, use me to lure Dante, kill him if he came. I would be collateral damage, a footnote in their power struggle. In that crystalline moment of fear, I made a choice. I slammed my forehead into the bridge of his nose with all my strength. Pain exploded across my skull, but the shock of the impact made him release my wrist. Blood spurted from his nose as he stumbled backward, cursing in what sounded like Russian. I didn't wait to see more. I bolted for the kitchen. "Get her!" he roared, his voice thick with pain and rage. I burst through the swinging doors, hearing heavy footsteps behind me. The kitchen was dark, lit only by the dim safety lights above the exits. I grabbed the first weapon I could find, a heavy cast-iron pan hanging from the rack, and swung blindly as a shadow loomed in the doorway. Metal connected with flesh with a sickening thud. The scarred man crumpled to the floor with a groan. I didn't stop to check if he was conscious, just ran for the back door. It was locked. The third man must have been outside, securing it as ordered. Panicked, I turned, searching for another exit. The walk-in freezer? No, I'd be trapped. The service elevator? Too slow. The windows above the prep station were small, but they might be big enough. I climbed onto the counter, using a shelf for leverage, and pushed at the glass. It was stuck, painted shut years ago. Behind me I could hear the blonde man shouting orders, the sound of the scarred man staggering to his feet. Desperate, I slammed the pan against the window. The glass shattered outward, rain and cold air rushing in. I cleared the edges quickly and hoisted myself up, ignoring the glass shards cutting into my palms. I was halfway through when a hand clamped around my ankle, yanking me back. I kicked blindly, connecting with something solid. The grip loosened just enough for me to wrench free, tumbling out the window into the alley below. The fall was short but jarring. knocking the breath from my lungs. Rain soaked me instantly as I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the pain radiating from my palms and knees. Behind me, I could hear shouting, the sound of more glass breaking. I ran. The alley opened onto a side street, deserted in the downpour. I sprinted across it, ducking into another narrow passage between buildings. My lungs burned, my wet clothes weighing me down. I had no plan, no destination, just the desperate need to put distance between myself and my pursuers. A car engine roared to life somewhere behind me. Headlights swept the alley I had just left. They were mobile now, hunting. I pressed myself against a wall, trying to make myself invisible in the shadows. The gold bracelet. It felt like a beacon on my wrist, a target marking me as Dante's. As I ran, I tried to unfasten it, but my wet, bloodied fingers slipped on the clasp. In frustration, I left it, focusing instead on escape. I didn't know these streets well enough in the dark and rain. Each turn felt like a gamble. Each moment I expected headlights to find me or rough hands to grab me from the shadows. I needed help, but my phone was gone, and I knew no one in this neighborhood, except Dante's card, his personal number. I had memorized it, though I'd never used it, but I needed a phone. As I ran, I scanned the street for options, a late-night store, an open restaurant, even a payphone if such things still existed. There, a 24-hour convenience store, its fluorescent lights a beacon in the darkness. I staggered toward it, aware of how I must look, soaked, bloodied, wild-eyed with fear. The clerk looked up in alarm as I burst through the door, water streaming from my clothes. "Please," I gasped. "I need to use a phone. Emergency." Whether it was the desperation in my voice or the blood on my hands, the young man didn't argue, just pushed the store phone across the counter. My fingers trembled as I dialed, leaving smears of blood on the keypad. 1 ring. 2. I glanced nervously at the windows, expecting to see the blonde man's car pulling up at any moment. Elena. His voice, when it finally came, was alert despite the hour, as if he'd been waiting for my call. "Dante," I choked out, relief making my knees weak. "There are men. They were waiting at the restaurant. They're looking for you. They tried to—" I broke off, a sob catching in my throat. "Where are you?" The softness was gone, replaced with cold, deadly focus. I looked to the clerk. "Where is this place?" "Corner of Maple and 23rd, he supplied, watching me with growing concern. I repeated the address to Dante. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "Just cuts. I'm okay." A lie, but the truth felt too complicated to explain. "They're looking for me. They had a car." "Stay inside, away from windows. I'm coming." The line went dead. I sagged against the counter, adrenaline ebbing to leave me shaking and nauseated. The clerk, to his credit, didn't ask questions, just offered me a bottle of water and a handful of napkins for my bleeding hands. "Should I call the police?" he asked uncertainly. The question jolted me. The police. The logical answer was yes, of course. I'd been attacked, threatened, but instinct told me this was beyond what police could handle. The men who attacked me had known about Dante. About me. This was a different world with different rules. "No," I said finally. "Someone's coming for me." The clerk nodded, looking relieved not to be involved. "You can wait in the back room if you want. It's more private." I accepted his offer gratefully, retreating to the small storage area with its single folding chair and harsh overhead light. As I sat, the full weight of what had happened, what I had done, crashed over me. I had smashed a man in the face with a pan. I had kicked another. I had run like a hunted animal through the city, all because of my connection to Dante Vitelli. Time blurred as I sat there, cradling my injured hands, replaying the night's events. Had it been 10 minutes? 30? I couldn't tell. The sound of tires on wet pavement outside brought me alert again, fear surging anew. The clerk's hesitant voice called out, "Miss, there's someone here for you." I stood on shaky legs and moved toward the door, poised to run again if necessary. It wasn't necessary. Dante stood in the small store, a vision of lethal control in a black coat slick with rain. His face was a mask of contained fury, his eyes burning with an intensity that made the clerk shrink back. Behind him, I could see 2 cars and several of his men spreading out, securing the area. When Dante saw me, bloodied, soaking wet, trembling, something in his expression cracked. In 3 strides, he crossed to me, his hands coming up to frame my face. "Elena," he breathed, scanning me for injuries. His thumb brushed my forehead where a bruise was forming from my headbutt. "Who did this?" "3 men," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "At the restaurant. They were waiting for me to close up. They knew about us. About your mother. They wanted to use me to get to you." A muscle ticked in his jaw, the only outward sign of the rage I could feel emanating from him. Description. I provided what details I could. The blonde leader's accent, the scar on the second man's face, the silent watchfulness of the third. Dante turned to one of his men who had followed him inside. "Find them. Now." The man nodded once and disappeared into the night. To another, he said, "Take her to the penthouse. Dr. Maroney is already on his way." "No," I protested, surprising myself with my firmness. "I want to go home." Dante's eyes narrowed. "You're not safe there." "I'm not safe anywhere," I countered, a sudden anger flaring through my fear. "Not since I met you." The words hit their mark. Something flickered across Dante's face. Regret? Guilt? It was gone too quickly to interpret. "Elena," he said, his voice softer now, "please, let me protect you." There it was, the crux of the matter. Protection that came with strings, with danger, with consequences I was only beginning to understand. But as I stood there, cold and bleeding, I knew I had already crossed a threshold. There was no going back to my safe, ordinary life, even if I wanted to. "Okay," I said finally. "But just for tonight." Relief softened his features momentarily. He shrugged out of his coat and draped it over my shoulders. The weight of it was grounding, the lingering warmth of his body and the scent of his cologne wrapping around me like a shield. As he guided me to the waiting car, his arm protective around my waist, I caught sight of my reflection in the store window. A pale, bloodied girl nearly swallowed by a powerful man's coat. Her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and something darker, more complex. I barely recognized myself. The car that awaited was not the sleek sedan I'd become accustomed to, but an imposing SUV with what I suspected was bulletproof glass. Dante helped me into the back seat, sliding in beside me rather than leaving me to his driver. As we pulled away from the curb, I noticed more of his men emerging from shadows, moving with military precision. This wasn't just Dante coming to my rescue. This was a full security operation. "You knew," I said suddenly, turning to him. "You warned me to stay in that night. You knew something was happening." His expression remained impassive, but he didn't deny it. "I knew there were tensions. I didn't expect them to target you." "Who are they?" I asked, needing to understand what I'd been caught up in. Dante was silent for a long moment, as if weighing how much to tell me. Finally he said, "The Bratva, Russian organization. They've been trying to move into our territory for months." Our territory. The casual possessiveness of the phrase sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with my wet clothes. "Why me?" I whispered. "I'm nobody." Dante's hand found mine, careful of my cuts. "You were seen with me, with my mother. In my world, that makes you someone." His fingers tightened slightly. "I'm sorry, Elena. I never meant for you to be drawn into this." I looked down at our joined hands, at the gold bracelet still circling my wrist despite everything. "What happens now?" "Now," he said, his voice taking on that deadly calm I was beginning to recognize as his most dangerous mood. "I ensure this never happens again." I didn't ask how. Some questions were better left unasked. The rest of the journey passed in silence, my body gradually relaxing against the leather seat as exhaustion replaced adrenaline. At some point, my head came to rest against Dante's shoulder. He didn't move away, just adjusted slightly to make me more comfortable. As we drove through the rain-slick streets toward whatever sanctuary awaited, I realized with a clarity that should have terrified me, I was crossing a boundary, entering Dante Vitelli's world fully. What that meant, for my safety, my future, my very self, I couldn't yet say. but the gold bracelet on my wrist caught the passing streetlights, glinting like a promise, or a warning. Dante's penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a sleek high-rise overlooking the river. Even in my exhausted, shell-shocked state, I couldn't help but notice the understated luxury. The soaring windows, the rich textures, the perfect balance of modern design and old-world craftsmanship. It felt both intimidating and strangely familiar, as if I'd imagined this space long before I entered it. A distinguished older man awaited us. Dr. Maroney, I presumed. He attended to my injuries with efficient care, cleaning and bandaging the cuts on my hands, examining the bruise on my forehead. Throughout his ministrations, Dante never left my side, his dark eyes tracking every wince, every hitched breath. "She'll be fine," the doctor assured him in a heavy Italian accent. "The cuts are superficial, no concussion. Just make sure she rests." After the doctor left, Dante led me to a guest suite that was larger than my entire apartment. "There are clothes in the closet," he said. "They should fit well enough. Sleep as long as you need to." I glanced down at my still damp dress, now stained with blood and dirt. "Thank you." He hesitated at the door, his expression unusually uncertain. "Elena?" He seemed to struggle with what to say next. Finally, he simply nodded. "Good night. You're safe here." As the door closed behind him, I stood in the center of the luxurious room, feeling strangely hollow. The adrenaline had completely faded now, leaving me empty and cold. I stripped off my ruined clothes and stepped into the shower, letting scalding water wash away the physical remnants of the night's horrors. But the feeling of being hunted, of hands grabbing at me in the dark, that wouldn't rinse away so easily. I found silk pajamas in the closet. As promised, they were new, tags still attached, but somehow exactly my size. I tried not to think about what that implied about Dante's knowledge of my body, his preparation for this moment. Had he expected I would end up here eventually? The thought should have disturbed me more than it did. Despite my exhaustion, sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the blonde man's cold smile, felt the window glass cutting into my palms. Around 3 a.m, I gave up and ventured out of the room. The penthouse was silent and dimly lit. I padded through the main living area, my bare feet silent on the plush carpet, drawn to the floor-to-ceiling windows and the panoramic view of the city lights. From this height, everything looked peaceful, orderly, so different from the chaotic, dangerous streets I had fled through hours earlier. "You should be resting." I turned to find Dante watching me from the doorway to what appeared to be a home office. He had discarded his jacket and tie, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled to expose strong forearms. A tumbler of amber liquid dangled from his fingers. "I couldn't sleep," I admitted. He crossed to stand beside me at the window. "That's understandable, after what happened." We stood in silence for a moment, both gazing out at the city below. It struck me that this was how he saw the world, from above, removed, powerful, while I had always experienced it from ground level, vulnerable to its dangers. "They're dead, aren't they?" I asked quietly. "The men who attacked me." Dante didn't insult me with denial or deflection. "Yes." I nodded, absorbing this truth. 3 men had ceased to exist because they had threatened me, because I was connected to Dante Vitelli. I should have been horrified. Instead, I felt a complicated mixture of relief, guilt, and something darker I didn't want to examine too closely. "Did you order it, or did you do it yourself?" He studied me for a long moment, as if gauging whether I could handle the answer. "Does it matter?" "I don't know," I replied honestly. "I think it might to me." He took a sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving mine. "I handled it personally." The confession hung between us, heavier than any words previously spoken. Not just an admission of murder, but a declaration. This was who he was, what he did. This was the reality of his world. "Why?" I asked, though I wasn't entirely sure what I was questioning. Why he'd killed them, why he'd told me, why he'd drawn me into his orbit in the first place. Because they touched what is mine. The possessiveness in those words should have outraged me. Instead, a shiver ran through me that had nothing to do with fear. "I'm not yours, Dante." He set his glass down on a side table and moved closer, not touching me but near enough that I could feel the heat of his body. aren't you? From the moment you signed to my mother in that restaurant, you became part of my world. You just didn't know it yet. I didn't ask for this, I whispered, even as I stood my ground, refusing to step back from his proximity. Yet here you are, he replied, reaching out to trace the line of my jaw with gentle fingers, a touch so at odds with the violence I knew those hands were capable of. In my home, wearing my clothes, wearing my bracelet, despite everything that happened tonight. I glanced down at the gold chain still circling my wrist, the charm catching the city lights. I hadn't taken it off, not even to shower. I couldn't get the clasp open, I lied. The slight curve of his lips told me he saw through the falsehood. Elena, he said, my name a caress on his tongue. You fought. You escaped. You survived. Do you understand how extraordinary that is? Most people would have surrendered, begged, broken. I was terrified, I admitted. Yet you acted. You protected yourself. Pride colored his words. You're stronger than you know. A tear slipped down my cheek, the first I'd allowed myself since the attack. Dante caught it with his thumb, his touch impossibly gentle for a man I knew had killed without hesitation hours earlier. Why me? I asked, the question that had been haunting me since that first night at the restaurant. Of all the people in the world, why did you let me in? His dark eyes searched mine. Because you saw my mother, truly saw her, when everyone else looked past her. Because you weren't afraid to touch my world, even knowing what I am. His hand moved to cup my cheek. Because when you look at me, Elena, I see myself reflected as a man, not a monster. The raw honesty in his words took my breath away. I had crossed a threshold tonight, not just in the physical act of entering his home, but in my understanding of who Dante Vitelli was and what he meant to me. He was dangerous, violent, controlling. He was also protective, loyal, capable of tenderness I suspected few ever witnessed. What happens now? I asked, echoing my question from the car. He brushed a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering against my skin. That depends on you. On me? I gave a short, incredulous laugh. Nothing has been my choice since I met you. Everything has been your choice, he countered. I never forced you to dine with us, to spend time with my mother. I never forced you into my car, into my home. I removed obstacles, created opportunities, but the choice to walk through those doors was always yours. I wanted to argue, but the truth of his words stopped me. I had chosen this path, step by step. Even tonight, when he'd offered the security of his home, I could have refused. I hadn't. And now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What choice are you offering me now? His gaze intensified. Stay. Not just tonight. Be part of my world, Elena. Let me protect you, provide for you. Finish your studies. Become the interpreter you dream of being. Be the bridge between my mother and the world she struggles to hear. He paused, something vulnerable flickering behind his eyes. Be the bridge between me and a life I'd forgotten was possible. The offer hung in the air between us, breathtaking in its scope and implications. Not just safety or luxury, though both were certainly included, but purpose, belonging, connection. And if I say no? I asked, needing to know the boundaries of this choice. Then I will have a car take you home in the morning, he said simply. I will ensure your safety from a distance. You will never see me again, unless you wish to. I studied his face, searching for deception and finding none. You would let me go that easily? There would be nothing easy about it, he admitted, his voice rough with emotion I'd never heard from him before. But yes, I would respect your decision. I believed him, I realized with surprise. Despite everything, despite the violence and control that defined his existence, Dante Vitelli would honor my choice. The realization was a gift I hadn't expected. I need time, I said finally. To think. To be sure. He nodded, a flash of disappointment crossing his features before his usual composure returned. Of course. He stepped back, creating distance between us. Try to rest. We can talk more in the morning. As he turned to leave, I found myself reaching for him, my bandaged hand catching his. Dante. He went still, his eyes questioning as they met mine. Thank you, I said softly. for coming when I called, for understanding that I need time. Something in his expression softened. He raised my injured hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to the bandages. Sempre, Elena, always. The simple promise, delivered in his native tongue, settled into my chest like a vow. I watched him retreat to his office, the door closing quietly behind him, before returning to the guest room. Sleep came easier this time, deep and dreamless. When I woke, sunlight streamed through windows I'd forgotten to close. For a disorienting moment, I didn't know where I was. Then, the previous night's events crashed back, the attack, the escape, Dante. I found clothes laid out for me, simple jeans and a sweater that, like the pajamas, fit perfectly. After dressing and attempting to tame my tangled hair, I followed the scent of coffee to the kitchen. Sofia Vitelli sat at the island counter, her silver-streaked hair loose around her shoulders, hands cradling a mug of coffee. She looked up as I entered, her face lighting with a smile. "Elena," she signed immediately. "Dante told me what happened. I came as soon as I could. Are you all right?" I moved closer, signing back. "I'm okay. Just some cuts and bruises." She reached for my bandaged hands, examining them with motherly concern. "Those animals," she signed, her expression fierce. "Dante said they've been dealt with." The casual reference to what I knew meant murder should have disturbed me more than it did. Instead, I simply nodded. "Sit," she instructed, pushing a mug of coffee toward me. "Dante had to go out, but he'll be back soon." I took the offered seat, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "You came back from Sicily just for this?" She gave me a look that managed to be both affectionate and exasperated. "Of course. You're family now." The simple declaration stunned me. Family. Not because I had agreed to Dante's proposal, but simply because I was. In Sofia's eyes, at least, I had already been accepted. "I don't know if I can be part of this world." I signed honestly. "It's so different from everything I know." Sofia's expression grew thoughtful. "When I met Dante's father, I was a seamstress in a small village. I knew nothing of his business, his power. I only knew that when I was with him, I felt both terrified and more alive than I'd ever been." Her hands moved gracefully, painting the picture of her past. "I chose that life, knowing it would never be simple or entirely safe, but it was worth it to me." "Were you ever sorry?" I asked. Her smile turned wistful. "Sometimes. When Dante was small, and I worried for his future, when I saw the weight of responsibility crushing the joy from my husband's eyes." She reached for my hand. "But no, Elena. I was never sorry for choosing love, even when it came wrapped in danger." Love. The word lingered between us, unspoken but impossible to ignore. Was that what this was? This pull toward a man whose world terrified and fascinated me in equal measure? "He's different with you," Sofia continued, gentler. "I haven't seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you since he was a boy." I didn't know how to respond to that. Instead, I asked, "How did you do it? Live in this world without losing yourself?" Sofia squeezed my hand. "You create boundaries, carve out spaces that are just yours. And you find strength in loving someone who would burn the world to keep you safe." The conversation lingered in my mind as Sofia prepared breakfast, teaching me the signs for various Italian dishes as she worked. By the time Dante returned, I had reached a decision. He found us in the living room, signing animatedly about a book Sofia had recommended. When our eyes met, everything else seemed to fade away. He looked immaculate as always, his suit perfectly tailored, not a hint of the night's violence visible in his composed exterior. Yet something in his eyes had changed, a vulnerability I'd never noticed before. A question he didn't voice. Sofia glanced between us, a knowing smile playing on her lips. "I think I'll rest in my room for a while," she signed, pressing a kiss to my cheek, and then Dante's before tactfully leaving us alone. "You slept well?" Dante asked, remaining by the doorway as if unsure of his welcome. "Yes, thank you." I stood, closing some of the distance between us. "Your mother came back from Sicily." "I called her last night," he admitted. "She insisted on returning immediately." "For me," I said, still marveling at the realization. "For you," he confirmed. "She cares for you deeply." I took a deep breath. gathering my courage. "I've been thinking about your offer." His expression remained carefully neutral, though I saw the tension in his shoulders. "And?" "I have conditions," I said, surprised by my own boldness. "If I stay." Something like hope flickered in his dark eyes. "Name them." "I finish my degree. I work as an interpreter, a real job, not just for your mother. I keep my apartment, at least for now." I paused, then added the most important part. "And you never lied to me about any of it. Your business, the dangers, what you've done. I need to know exactly what I'm choosing." Dante studied me for a long moment, weighing my demands. Then he closed the distance between us, stopping just short of touching me. "You drive a hard bargain, Elena Russo." "Do we have a deal?" I asked, my heart pounding. A slow smile spread across his face, not the controlled, measured expression I was used to, but something genuine and transformative. "Yes, we have a deal." Relief and something warmer flooded through me. I reached up, allowing my hand to rest against his cheek. His eyes darkened at the contact, his control visibly fraying. "There will be dangers," he warned, even as he leaned into my touch. "Enemies. People who will try to use you to get to me." "I know," I replied. "I'll learn to protect myself, to be worthy of this world." "You're already worthy," he said fiercely, his hand coming up to cover mine. "More than worthy." The final distance between us vanished as he pulled me into his arms, his lips finding mine in a kiss that felt like coming home and stepping off a cliff simultaneously. Dangerous and safe, familiar and thrilling. The contradiction that was Dante Vitelli, the man who had rewritten the boundaries of my world. As I melted into him, the gold bracelet caught the sunlight. The charm with its sign for friend, now a promise of something much deeper. I had made my choice, eyes open, fully aware of the shadows and light that came with loving a man like Dante Vitelli. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't always be safe. But as Sophia had said, some loves were worth the danger they brought with them. And in Dante's arms, surrounded by the world he had built and now offered to share with me, I knew I had found mine.